Welcome to the opening line report here on Vegas Insider. Kevin Rogers with you, and hope you had a great holiday weekend. But it's time to get back to business now. It's week 17 of the NFL, 2 weeks to go in the regular season, and a lot of big games coming up this weekend, including the Bills and the Bengals to wrap up the week 17 card on Monday night in Cincinnati. And that's going to be the highlight game. Patrick Everson joins us as he does every week here on the opening line report. And Patrick's going to break down all the numbers and what he's heard. And remember, today's Tuesday, so already an extra day where the lines have moved. So, Patrick, welcome. Merry Christmas. Good to have you back on with us. And let's get it going. I mentioned that Buffalo-Cincinnati game right out of the gate. Monday night, actually, ESPN gets a good game, unlike the Chargers-Colts game, which was awful on Monday night this past week. But when you look at this Bills-Bengals game, and Buffalo, favored on the road here. Bengals have been the best ATS team since starting 0-2. And right now, they played, 15 games so far, and they have gone, 12-3 against the spread. So 12-1 ATS the last 13, so starting 0-2 against the spread. They're a dog here. Winner of this game, inside track for the 1 seed. Loser, going to probably play the first weekend, but what are you hearing here with the Bills as a short road favorite against the Bengals?
Yeah, definitely interesting. This, in talking about this Sunday night with Casey Degnan behind the counter at the Superbook, they opened Bengals 1.5. Obviously, it's a huge game for both teams. As you said, the inside track for not, for home field, but also for that first week bye, not having to play as part of that super wild card weekend setup. But Casey said, look, we felt like the Bills had to open as favorites, even though since he is hot right now and at home, two things that certainly work in the Bengals' favor. He said early on there wasn't too much significant on the side or the total, but he thinks this game is going to get really good action on both sides. The Superbook, as we talk on Tuesday morning, my time, Tuesday afternoon, your time, is down 0.5 point but still has the Bills favorite at -1. I don't know what you think, but I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to pick and maybe even jumps the fence. Like you said, if you've been riding Cincinnati for the last 3 months, you've made, quite a bit of money. Your ROI has been fantastic. This team covers every week and wins almost every week. So they're just absolutely on fire, and ATM when it comes to cash and tickets against the spread.
So I wonder, Patrick, if people are going to go that direction and say, well, how do you look at the Bengals, a home underdog? How do you pass on them? They keep winning. They keep covering. I mean, they got very lucky in that game against New England on Saturday. It felt like the Bengals were going to run away with that game. The Patriots made it interesting, and they kind of botched things up at the end. They've had a couple of weeks of botching things up. But what does that say about Buffalo, though, Patrick, and how strong, I guess, the power rating is with the odds makers that still with Buffalo, again, they have an opportunity at the 1 seed. It could drop off if they lose this game, but to show how much faith they have in Buffalo here as a road favorite.
Oh, absolutely. I think it absolutely does that. It speaks volumes to Buffalo in kind of the opposite way. Well, it's a similar way, but in an opposite vein, that the odds makers still don't really believe in Minnesota, haven't really believed in the Giants for a good chunk of the season. So the Bills are kind of the flip side of that, although I do think there was a stretch there maybe a month or so ago where it was kind of bumpy for the Bills, and maybe they're getting it back together, but they certainly are believers in the Bills this week, like you said, making them a road favorite. They definitely have some faith in that team. But it's interesting. I mean, when you think about the Bengals have 3 wins over the Chiefs in the last 12 months. I mean, it's a really good team. I mean, there's no getting around the straight up record, and the spread record is just unbelievable. And I think I saw something this morning where there's something like 19-3 ATS in their last 22 or something. It's just an incredible spread covering mark for that team. So it certainly tells you what the odds makers think of the Buffalo Bills, and that maybe they're not just yet totally sold on the Cincinnati Bengals.
And the other note, too, on this game, Patrick, before we move on, is so the Bengals have 3 losses this year. The Baltimore game, they lost in a last-second field goal, last-minute field goal. They had an opportunity to win that game. The Pittsburgh game in week 1, they had the 5 turnovers, Burrow, the early pick 6. They still went to overtime and still missed a field goal in overtime. And even in the Dallas game, week 2, in which Dak didn't play, was Cooper Rush's first start, The Cowboys were up big in that game. Cincinnati tied it, had the ball with less than 2 minutes left, but they ended up punting, and then Dallas went down and kicked the field goal. Not to say Cincinnati should be undefeated at this point, but the 3 losses, they've been squeezing all 3 of those games.
Exactly. They've been close losses. They could easily have an even better mark. It's they've really rebounded nicely from the 0-2. And if anybody had seen that and thought, you know what, this is a team that's going to turn it around, I'm going to start getting on them. Well, congrats to them, because they've just been fantastic. And even if you jumped on them early in the futures market or whatever, got a better number after a couple of weeks because they got out of the gate slow, and maybe you took them in the AFC or in the division or Super Bowl, you certainly got yourself a better price. And you can see now this team's just on fire.
Yeah, and that's the last primetime game of the week. The first primetime game of the week doesn't have the same cachet. It's the Cowboys and the Titans in Nashville, and a lot of storylines here. Once again, I mean, Malik Willis is going to start the rest of the way with Ryan Tannehill hurt. But Tennessee, Patrick, a few weeks ago, they were cruising on top of the AFC South. Now, all of a sudden, they've lost 5 straight. They stubbed their toe against Houston this past weekend. Jacksonville has caught them. So Tennessee in must-win mode just to make the playoffs. They thought they were going to win the division. It was no big deal. Now they may not make the playoffs. Dallas, meanwhile, they outlast Philadelphia in that game on Saturday, 40-34. Cowboys heavy favorites, total at 40.5. This Tennessee team cannot score. This seems like a ton of points for Dallas to lay, but also it's hard to make a case for Tennessee. But what are you hearing with this game to start Week 17?
Well, and again, like you noted, that total down to 40.5. That was a 43 opener at the Superbook. So that's come down pretty dramatically. And actually the first move at the Superbook was Sunday night up to 43.5. So now it's all the way back down to 40.5, to your point on that. But, and again, it is a lot of points, 9.5 on the Cowboys. And what was interesting about this, Casey Degnan behind the counter of the Superbook, he said the early line, the look ahead line last week was Dallas -3, but that was before the Tannehill news broke. He said we got as high as Dallas -6.5 on last week's look-ahead line before it came off the board. Then you get the Titans losing to the Texans, 88 passing yards in the game. He said we had to open higher than 6.5 based on how Willis has looked at QB. So all the way to 9.5 as an opener, and now sitting 10 at the Superbook. So it's double digits there now. They've got no faith in the Titans at all in this game. And it's kind of interesting, with a 40.5 total and a 10-point spread, that's a really interesting situation, I guess, to have such a high spread and a low total. It really tells you that they don't think the Titans are going to put up very many points at all.
Well, also, Patrick, looking at this game initially, you would say, all right, Vrabel's been a pretty good underdog since he took over as coach of the Titans. And how do you lay this amount of points on the road with Dallas? I mean, Dallas, to the point like I made before about Cincinnati, they've had some of these games they were squeezed in. Dallas, to be fair to them, they were up, 17 at Jacksonville, lost in overtime. They were up 14-0, I think 28-14 at Green Bay, lost in overtime. So they've blown some leads. They've been excellent this year. In the Philadelphia game, they were down most of the way before they came back. But to lay this amount of points with Dallas, their defense has not been good the last 2 weeks. And now you're faced a Tennessee team, again, desperation mode. Derrick Henry's not at 100%. But on the total side, it's down to 40.5. In all 3 of Malik Willis's starts, they've scored 17 or less each time. That I don't know how you make an argument for Tennessee to score in this game.
Right. And I think that's what everybody must be thinking and what's driving this total down so quickly. Again, we're only talking, it's Tuesday now, and it's off by 3 points from the high at Superbook and 2.5 points from the opening number. They just don't think Tennessee is going to be able to score the football. But again, to your point, I mean, do you trust Dallas laying 9.5, 10, now 10 points at the Superbook, and I assume elsewhere? That's a lot. I mean, to me, this game, especially on a short week, this game screams stay away. Unless you feel really good about, I mean, I sort of think I don't know, because I don't know if Tennessee can score, but at 40.5, if you think Dallas is going to cover, then there's going to have to be some points scored to get there. But maybe Dallas scores them all and it ends up being like, 27-10 or something like that, and it comes in under. It could very well be something like that.
Or you just go Dallas first half, because they jumped out to the Minnesota. They blew them out. Again, Green Bay and Jacksonville, they were big in those games early before they blew them. Maybe you just say first half, forget it. Let's make this a 30-minute game and hope that Dallas can go up by a touchdown or so at the half, and then you're in good shape. So, that's definitely another way to look at it.
Sure.
Now the Sunday games, Patrick, we'll begin in Foxborough. So go over this for me, please, for the audience. Tua Tagovailoa, he gets hurt in the Green Bay game on Sunday. They lose to the Packers. It's now 4 straight defeats. Now the Dolphins have got to scramble. Teddy Bridgewater made up starting this game. The Patriots, after these 2 losses they've suffered the last 2 weeks, I'm not going to say they should have. The Cincinnati game, they were down big. They had an opportunity to win. The Raider game, they just threw away at the end. But now the Patriots are favored in this game, and obviously big game for the playoffs for both teams. Just talk about the line movement in this one with the news of Tua maybe not playing on Sunday.
Right. This was interesting because obviously on Sunday night, there was no information out there that indicated there was any issue with Tua other than obviously he had a miserable fourth quarter against the Packers in a game that, in the first half, it looked like Miami very much had, I wouldn't say in hand, but they were up 20-10. They looked pretty good. They had a couple just Tua and his wideouts had a couple of monster plays. And, it looked like they were going to find a way to win that game. So Sunday night, this opens -2 at the Superbook, Miami -2 on the road, based on all the struggles that, as you've noted, that the Patriots have had of late. And what Casey said at the time was both teams didn't look great in week 16, but we did feel as though Miami had to open as the favorite. And he felt both sides would attract money and so on. I'm not sure so much that both sides will attract money now that we have this information that came out Monday with Tagovailoa in the concussion protocol. And of course, the line has reacted accordingly. It opened Miami -2 at the Superbook. It has flipped all the way to Patriots -2.5. I wouldn't be. I don't know that I would be surprised if they make a formal announcement. And again, I haven't seen this morning yet. But if Tua is formally announced out, but you could see that go a little bit further still. But again, Casey said he thought it would be a good 2-way game, but that was with Tua Tagovailoa playing quarterback. They may get into a position here where they actually, where the line has jumped the fence, which it has, and where they actually need Miami in this game.
What about the total at 42? Now, if Teddy ends up playing and New England's had some issues scoring, do you just remain under on that one? What do you think about the total?
Well, and that's the thing. That initially Sunday night went up from 43 to 43.5 at the Superbook. And then to your point, it's now down. It's now backed up to 42. So they're already starting to factor this in, perhaps, planning on Tua not playing. That's definitely an interesting one. They don't feel like Miami can be nearly as explosive, but it's not like it fell off 3 or 4 points. It's down a point from the opener, 1.5 from the high point at the Superbook. That's a tough one for me to call. And I don't even think you can really, based on how these two teams' seasons have unfolded, which for a good chunk of the season, New England's season unfolded, I think, better than people expected. And certainly Miami's did as well. And before this past month, they looked great. And honestly, they looked really good for a half against Green Bay. They were tremendous. But you can't even really look, I think, to the last game. These two teams against each other, these two teams opened the season against each other. Miami wins 20-7 as a 3-point favorite at home, but both teams are just so far from where they were in week 1 that I'm not sure you can really look at that and put much faith in it either, especially obviously without Tagovailoa under center.
Now, this NFC South, which is just a dumpster fire, I don't even know how to describe it, Patrick, just because you have Tampa Bay, who should have lost at Arizona. Mm-hmm. Brady, he's Teflon. They're still there. They're still hanging around. They face Carolina coming up on Sunday. The Buccaneers, how about this, Patrick? So they're a 2-touchdown favorite at Carolina a few months ago. They lose that game outright. They got destroyed in that game by Carolina. The Panthers, who were dead in the water for a while, they're now back. They have an opportunity to pull off the season sweep of Tampa Bay. New Orleans is still hanging around in this thing, too. They got to go to Philadelphia on Sunday. Buccaneers a 3-point favorite here, total of 39.5. Carolina, how about this number? 7-1 against the spread. The last 8 is a dog. So they've been excellent against the number. They just beat Detroit on Saturday. No faith in Brady. They've covered what? 3 times this year. They haven't covered in America since week 2. What about Brady and the Bucs?
I love that they haven't covered in America since week 2. What a great stat. Yeah, and this was interesting because the Superbook, and among others, opened this at $6.5. But keep in mind, so the Bucs were in the Sunday night game. The Superbook puts up its odds for the following week's games, usually about an hour, maybe 2 hours ahead of the current week's Sunday night game. So about 2 hours, an hour to 2 hours ahead of the Buccaneers Cardinals game. The Superbook puts up its week 17 numbers, has the Bucs at 6.5. When that game kicks off at the Superbook and others, I don't know if everybody takes them down, but quite a few books take these games off the board when a team is in play, as the Bucs were on Sunday night at Arizona. So they took it off the board. They come back up. They put it back up on Monday morning, and this speeds pretty quickly down. 5.5, 4.5, 4, 3. So people were definitely nonplussed with that Tampa Bay performance on Sunday night. And I can understand why. It was this probably isn't even a word. It was a very nonplussing performance. It wasn't that good. Brady and co managed to get it done at the end. But what Casey Degnan again at the Superbook, what he said at the time, and this is Sunday night, before the Bucs Cardinals game is really unfolded, he said, I think the Bucs will be involved in a bunch of parlays and teasers, so I think we'll be rooting for Carolina to pull the upset. This line has moved so much that probably has adjusted the calculus from the odds makers' point of view and certainly from the bettors' point of view. But obviously a huge game, and it's just fascinating that Carolina, which fired its coach like 5 weeks into the season and then followed by trading Christian McCaffrey to the Niners, controls its own destiny when it comes to the NFC South.
And also Baker Mayfield. Now he's a star.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Their big win over your Broncos on Sunday. But staying with this one for a second, Patrick, is there value on Tampa Bay after the first matchup? And I know, again, the circumstances, Carolina was shot. They were done, and that's what it seemed like. And they obviously had a good performance against Tampa Bay that day. That was when the Mike Evans dropped that first or second play of the game on that bomb for Brady, and it kind of went all downhill from there. But you go from a 13-point road favorite to now a 3-point home favorite. Is there value now in Tampa Bay because everyone's so down on them?
I feel like there is, and I'd be tempted to lay that 3, and I would think that when the public starts weighing in on this game as we get closer to the weekend, there's so much going on this week. You've got the college football national championship semifinals, among a host of other bowl games, a couple of the early New Year's Six games ahead of Sunday NFL. So there's a lot for bettors to digest this week before they really start focusing on the NFL. But I would think the public would come in on the Bucs ultimately. But right now, and again, this is early in the week, a very small snapshot of what's going on at DraftKings. 61% of early spread tickets, 82% of early spread money on the Panthers. And again, this is probably a really small pot, and that 82% of money could even be skewed. Somebody may have come in and placed a relatively large wager early in the week that's making that number skew toward Carolina when it's not really reflective of what's actually happening. But still, the Bucs getting 18% of money in this game and the line's down to 3. I mean, it's like somebody either knows something or there's an opportunity there. And I'm with you. I think this is an overcorrection. Look, the Bucs didn't look good. They haven't looked good in months. They don't cover the number at all. But that just seems like in a game they got to have, you still got Tom Brady under center. You've got a decent defense. You're at home. The division is there for the taking if you can get the win. I'm with you. I think there's some value there all the way down to 3 points.
To be fair also, Patrick, looking at Carolina since they beat Tampa Bay 21-3 back in late October, here are their recent wins. Atlanta, Denver, Seattle, Detroit. All teams that probably are not, well, we know Atlanta's not going to the playoffs. Denver's definitely not going to the playoffs. Seattle and Detroit are on the cusp, but they need some help to get in. But the point is that they're beating not great teams. I'm not taking away from what Carolina's done.
Sure.
But Tampa Bay, I don't know. Maybe it's just still the Brady thing. Even though Brady has dropped off this year, he's not doing what he did last year, throwing for 5,000 yards. But I say, man, like Tampa Bay's got to get it together sooner or later. They know the division's on the line and they can get a home game in the playoffs. Like, or are we just like hoping it's going to happen, but really it's just not?
And that's the thing. I just can't, as bad as they've looked. And credit to Carolina for putting itself in this position. And honestly, that win over Tampa early in the season as a double-digit, huge, as a healthy double-digit underdog is looming large in this game. It is the reason that this game is as valuable as it is to both these teams. That Carolina's even in the hunt at this point. So, I mean, you got to give them credit. But like you said, it's middling to sub-middling teams that they've beaten to get into this position. I just, it's hard to see them going into Tampa and winning that game in this situation. I mean, look, we've been waiting all season for Tampa to do something, and we may be waiting. Maybe they just don't do it, but I would have a hard time betting Carolina in the spot. And I wouldn't feel bad at all about laying 3 with Tampa.
So now you go from one veteran laying 3 to another veteran laying 3, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, who are back in it now. They've awoken from the dead. They've won 3 straight. They rallied past the Dolphins. Now you get the Vikings going to Lambeau. These teams met in week 1, and Minnesota pretty much took care of Green Bay in that game. And what's so funny, Patrick, is for all of these one-score victories for Minnesota, the 61-yard field goal against the Giants, the comeback against the Colts, all these you could list, their most convincing win came against Green Bay back in week 1. And ever since then, it's always been these close games. But the Vikings, we saw them as a dog a few weeks ago against Detroit, which everyone scratched their head, and Detroit ended up being the right side. But now is Green Bay the right side, laying 3 here at Lambeau with 2 to go? They need to win both their games, get some help, and they get in the playoffs.
Yeah, and everything that they needed to have happen in Week 16 happened, which was just amazing. And then all they had to do was go out and take care of business in Miami, which I don't know exactly. I haven't read the full reports on when they think Tua got dinged, but maybe that was I think the idea is that maybe that impacted Tua's play in the fourth quarter of that game.
It was the second quarter. It was late in the second quarter before halftime.
Right, and he was playing lights out in the first half. I mean, they were just up and down, with Tyreek Hill and Waddle. I mean, just up and down the field. It was ridiculous. So, it's interesting in that they did take care of business and put themselves in position. I mean, I feel like I don't know how the Packers could be in a more ideal spot. They get to, I believe their last 2 games are at home, right?
Yes, Detroit.
Detroit at home as well. So they get to play outdoors against 2 indoor teams in the last 2 weeks of the season. I think it's a pretty ideal spot. But again, to your point, the one convincing win that the Vikings have beyond a 1-score game was the 23-7 victory, laying 2.5 points in week 1 against the Packers. And what Casey said about this game is if the Packers had, the reason it opened 3.5 at the Superbook was because the Packers won on Sunday. He's like, this game would not have opened. It would have opened less than 3.5 if the Packers had lost. But they opened 3.5, ultimately went to 3 minus 120 at the Superbook early on. I think that it stayed there all Sunday night, but on Monday it went to 3 minus 120. Now it's back up to 3.5 on the Packers again. And Casey said that some of the early interest has been on the Packers, and he expects the book is going to end up needing the Vikings here, especially since he believes there's going to be a lot of money line parlays that are going to be tied to Green Bay. People buying into Aaron Rodgers. I think they're going to buy into Aaron Rodgers more than they're going to buy into Tom Brady this week, but they may buy into both of them on the money line parlay front. But I think he's right about that. I think people are going to be convinced that Green Bay at home in the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field and all that, trying to scrape through to get into the playoffs. They'll be running money line parlays to Green Bay, just almost like it was last year when they were really good and winning all the time.
Does it seem like kind of a high total to you at 47, considering the first meeting you said 23-7? And yeah, Minnesota's been involved in high scoring games, but really Green Bay has not had any of that big fourth quarter against Chicago a few weeks ago, but even the Rams game, the Monday night a few weeks ago was low scoring, and the Dolphin game didn't really get that high because the Dolphins didn't score the second half. But do you think this total's a little higher?
It feels like it, and it's gone up. It was open 45.5 at the Superbook, and now, as you said, sitting at 47 feels a little high. Like you said, the first matchup between these teams only got to 30. The game on Sunday, the Packers-Dolphins game, I think the total closed like 49 or something like that. And, at halftime, everybody's like, okay, this game is going to sail over. These teams are going up and down the field. And then it didn't. The Dolphins didn't score again. And the Packers scratched out some points, but that game still ended up being a couple of points shy of going over, ended up an under. So it feels that way, especially I haven't looked at the weather yet, but look, even if it's sunny, it's not like it's going to be 60. This is Green Bay we're talking about, and a 3:25 Eastern time start. So they probably only got a good chunk of the first half in daylight, and then it's going to get significantly colder regardless of what it is during the day. So it does feel a little bit high. I'd be, and again, it's up 1.5 points in just the first 2 days of the week. So, I don't know if people are going to keep weighing in on the over, but if they are, you might want to sit tight and see if you can even get a higher number and then jump in on the under.
The Sunday night game, Patrick, the one that got flexed out, they flexed out the Chargers-Rams, thankfully. Steelers-Ravens in Baltimore. These teams met a little bit ago in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers were a short favorite. They had Mitchell Trubisky throwing interceptions all over the place, and now the Steelers are a dog. Mike Tomlin still at the shot. It's incredible. He's never had a losing season. They still have an opportunity to get to a winning record here. Pittsburgh probably not going to make the playoffs, but trying to finish on a good note here. And Baltimore, still without Lamar Jackson, they're now in the playoffs. They have a shot to win the AFC North. The worst case, they're a wild card. So the Ravens, a 3-point favorite here on Sunday night.
Yeah, and this is sharp money that's come in on Pittsburgh early in the week on the road as an underdog. And obviously it's a real, it's an intriguing game for both teams, which is why they flexed it in. But this was something that out of the gate, the number was Ravens 4.5 at the Superbook, and out of the gate, and for a couple, maybe a couple of hours or so, there was really nothing to it. And in fact, when Casey got back to me with his comments on Sunday evening, it was before there had been any movement. It was still at 4.5 Ravens. But then a little bit later Sunday evening, the line drops to Baltimore 3.5, and then on Monday it goes down to 3. And what Casey said, yes, I talked to him on Monday just to follow up, said, hey, that was a pretty big move. What's going on? And he said, some respected money came in on Pittsburgh plus 4.5, as well as on the under, and the total opened at 37.5 and is now down to 36. So down 1.5 points, a pretty tidy total there. Obviously, not sure I don't think we're sure yet about Lamar Jackson's status. Baltimore's already clinched a playoff spot, right? And I'm not really sure what they can do in the way of moving up or down as far as who they might have to face. I guess they're still potentially there with Cincinnati, right? The division is still a possibility there, but definitely keep an eye on Baltimore's injury report this week, because that's gonna affect things as well. But interesting game, and sharp folks like the Steelers early in the week at that plus 4.5 and plus 4.
Now, we have, like you mentioned before, Patrick, the college football playoff. That is Saturday with the 2 games, TCU, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia. Any new news with these 2 games, any line movements?
Yeah, there was and I'm dialing it up right now. There it is. Just did an update on VegasInsider.com in the article on the college football playoff semifinals, the odds and action report. So just got a fresh update on that on Monday. Talking to an odds maker buddy of mine, Zachary Lucas, who's with Twin Spires, which is only in the retail market. But a lot of times, some of these guys have some good insights, regardless of where they're at. They're seeing interest in action that oftentimes mirrors and kind of plays along with what the big, what the major operators are seeing. These are smart people who give good insights, and this has kind of been the case everywhere. It sounds like because I also talked to BetMGM about this a little bit earlier in December, pre-Christmas, and they're lopsided on Georgia in that semifinal against Ohio State. Multiple books are lopsided. And what Zachary told me this week is Georgia is our biggest liability of all the bowl games that are left, whether it's the playoff or the New Year's Six games or all of these other bowl games that are going on over these next several days. He said Georgia is the biggest liability of all those games left. They did see some sharp play on Ohio State early at +7, prompted them to go to 6.5, but they got to 7 pretty shortly thereafter and still sitting 7 there. I believe other spots are still hanging on to 6.5 on Georgia at this point. But like I said, a little bit earlier in the month, Christian Cipollini at BetMGM said we are very lopsided on Georgia spread. So it's looking very much like they're going to need the Buckeyes in that game as we get closer to kickoff. We'll see what happens, but that's going to be the play there. And then in the other game, I think most spots are ultimately expecting need TCU. I will say Zachary Lucas said that TCU is taking a little bit more tickets, a little bit more money on the spread. But you got to think that Michigan's going to be in teasers and parlays and moneyline parlays like crazy. And then I thought a good point that, again, Christian Cipollini at BetMGM made. And this is something I've seen all season and really over this past year or so. With the expansion of sports betting, Michigan is a really, really rabid market for its home teams, whether it's the Lions or the Wolverines or Michigan State, et cetera, et cetera. They are betting their home teams in ways that, much more strongly than, say, Colorado is, and maybe the Broncos are not a good example, but some of these other regional markets are not betting their teams in the way that Michigan bettors are betting their teams. And Christian said, look, I think we're going to have perhaps 75 to 80% of spread money come in on Michigan, because he said BetMGM has a big presence in Michigan. Public has been all over Michigan all season, whether they were public bettors in Michigan or anywhere else in the country. So they think, even though that number's gone down, notably 9, maybe even 9.5, I think at some point or early on, to the current 7.5, I think is where they're at right now. Double checking on this. Yeah, 7.5. Even though that number's come toward TCU, it's definitely going to be plenty of public play on Michigan.
Should be fun. Those two games coming up on Saturday, and we still have a handful of games. Got a lot of games the rest of the week as far as the Bulls go. Patrick Everson, you could find him on Twitter at @PatrickE_Vegas. Also, you can find more of his work at Vegas Insider. And again, Patrick, tell the people where they could find your latest reports for the NFL and for college and anything else.
Right. Well, all the games we just discussed, that's in an article on VegasInsider.com that will update throughout the week with insights from multiple books, so you can get a perspective from a lot of different odds makers on that. All those 6 games will update all week long in the article at Vegas Insider, as will the college football playoff semifinals report, and there's a New Year's 6 odds report as well. And of course, there is a slew of other great content from you and all the other contributors and people at Vegas Insider. There's a ton of great content, great information. Again, Kevin does a ton of great work for Vegas Insider, and there's several others who have we're loaded up. We got wall-to-wall content on everything, but of course we're focusing heavily on NFL and college football at this point. There's a lot of good content. So please just head to the website and check it all out. Hit our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter at Vegas Insider. All those platforms will give you a whole lot of valuable information this week.
Patrick, again, I appreciate your kind words and always your contributions here. And when we talk to you next, it'll be 2023 for Week 18 of the NFL. So looking forward to the opening line report next week. And again, Patrick, thank you so much for the time. And we'll talk to you again next week to go over Week 18.
Sounds great, Kevin. Thank you. Have a good week.
That is Patrick Everson. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for tuning in. And as always, best of luck with your bets.